Senator John Thune is a member of the Senate Republican leadership and joins me now. Senator Thune, thank you so much. What do you think should happen to Edward Snowden if he is charged and extradited?
Well, good afternoon, Andrea. I guess I would number myself among those who believe that we've got to follow the law, and obviously we have laws in the books. If the laws don't work, we should change the laws. But we've got to, if this individual, Mr. Snowden, broke our laws, then we need to go after him. We need to prosecute him. And I think that's what most of the American people would expect, whether or not they're sympathetic with what he was doing or not, and I'm sure there will be some who are. I think that most Americans believe that we're a nation of laws. We've got to enforce the laws.
That said, do you have concerns that the sweeping up of all of these phone numbers of Americans, every phone call made, separately from the foreign emails that can then be pursued through a court warrant if there is a terror threat, do you think it's too broad? Do you think it needs to be narrowed?
I think that's a really good question, Andrea, and I think that's one that members of Congress are going to want to know the answer to. And I suspect there's going to be a real push for additional congressional oversight of some of these programs. Are we over-collecting? Have these programs been successful? Are members of Congress fully briefed? And more importantly, to the American people? I think those are all very valid questions, many of which are going to be asked this week. And I think that hopefully we'll have an opportunity through some additional oversight to get members of Congress more fully briefed, to get some of these questions answered. This is a very broad, far-reaching collection program, granted a program that collects, quote, metadata that doesn't include any information, confidential information other than phone numbers, to be matched up perhaps at some later time. But it's still something that I think there's going to be a lot of concern about across the country, and certainly here on Capitol Hill.
We keep being told that there's oversight, there's congressional oversight, there's legal oversight. Do you think the congressional oversight is meaningful? Were you fully aware of what you were voting for, A or nay, back in December when you were reauthorizing the program?
Well, I think that, the times that this program's been reauthorized, much of this operates in levels where there are not that many people, members of Congress, who are fully engaged in what's going on. And, the intelligence committees obviously are involved in Homeland Security, I think, to some degree. But most members of Congress are given a piece of legislation to vote on. And I don't believe that most members of Congress, perhaps going into this, were fully aware of how broad this program was. And so, yes, you vote because you're obviously concerned about protecting the country. Many of these tools have been used and have been effective in preventing terrorist attacks. But I think now, as more of these details are starting to come out, there are going to be additional questions raised and asked, and hopefully some answers given that will give us a better understanding not only of how this program works today, but how we might proceed with it in the future in the way that protects individual privacy, but also gives us the necessary tools that we need to fight terrorism and to protect Americans.
What do you say to Rand Paul and some of the others who really are deeply concerned about the invasion of privacy?
Well, I think they raise legitimate and valid concerns. I do believe that we need to get the facts, and I think there is some misunderstandings about what's involved in, for example, the metadata that is used. It is just raw phone numbers. It's kept for a period of time. It's only used if there is some question about a phone number that needs to be matched up against that database. So I think there's perhaps a misunderstanding out there around the country that this is you're getting information about people's calls and that sort of thing, which just isn't the case. But I do believe that there are a lot of our libertarian folks around the country who, anytime you talk about this subject, are going to want to make sure that we're protecting the Constitution, protecting people's individual rights, and that's a healthy debate to have. It's a difficult debate because we live in a very different time. We've got so many forms of technology now that are used by terrorists, and we have to, as a government, protect the American people from potential terrorist attacks, but try and strike that balance that also protects individual liberties.
Before I let you go, I wanted to ask you about the immigration reform legislation that is being worked on. It's already on the floor, as you know, the bipartisan plan. Kelly Ayotte has announced her support. Does this mean that you could see the possibility of weakening a filibuster and you joining, in fact, in supporting immigration?
Right. I'm going to make that judgment after it moves across the floor and we get an opportunity through the amendment process to see if we might, how the bill gets changed, how it might get improved. But I think there's a very real possibility that they'll have 60 beyond 60, north of 60, in order to get on the bill and then probably ultimately to pass it. The question is, can changes be made in the bill that might attract even more people to it and make it a larger number?
Thank you very much, Senator Thune. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Andrea.